Got the Sandcraft RCR, I guess it'd be like the Gen 3 carrier bearing for my 2017 Can-Am Maverick X3 XRS, and we're going to be installing that baby today. So what I've done so far is take these two panels off. There's another panel off because I'm replacing it. It's not related at all, but those just pop off super easy. You just lift them off. Just, you don't really need any tools or anything, maybe a screwdriver. We pop those panels off on this and passenger side. Same thing on the driver's side, and that gives you access to the carrier bearing. So you can see that. There we go. So there's a carrier bearing there. There's just two bolts holding that. One there. They're both 15 millimeter. So that, and there's one on the driver's side. And before we undo that, we're going to undo the bolt right there that holds the yoke to the front diff. Keeps it from sliding off. That is a 13 millimeter. We're going to do that, and then we'll slide the portion of the prop shaft back off of the front diff. Shaft off. There it is. Kind of just put it over to the left there. Comes off and it slips right over to the left. It's pretty easy. So now we're going to go to inside the car, and we're going to slide the prop shaft forward on those splines, and that'll get us, let me get it to where we can get this. Alright, so I slid that off. I just shot it with a bit of WD-40 before, but came off pretty easy nonetheless. So slid that up. It just went right to the side of the front diff because we took that part off earlier. So now we're going to undo these 15 millimeter bolts. So there's the snap ring that's holding the bearing on. So we are going to have to take that off. Some 90-degree snap ring pliers are pretty handy here. So I just have a big old set from Snap-on like this, but these are 90-degree. And pop that baby off there now. Got that snap ring off. A word of advice: do it from the driver's side, because this cutout is much larger than the one on the passenger side, which stops right at the end of the shaft there. So you have a lot more room here. You can get your head by the pedal and look right in here. See that snap ring? So after I took that out, this just slides off super easy. So you'll just take this baby off of there. Six panels kind of in the way. There you go. So there is the OEM bearing. And now we're going to do a bit of cleaning. We're going to want to clean, the surface that that bearing rides on. And just going to clean everything else up in here too, because why not? Here is the front portion of the prop shaft. Check these U-joints. They all seem like they're perfect. But here is something a little concerning. My Sandcraft bearing doesn't line up with the OEM bearing. So would like to know why that is. It doesn't line up, top to bottom or left to right, and it's about in the same position as the other one, mounting wise. I mean, the holes line up, so that's good. But I have this up on blocks too because the factory bearing hangs down. So I'm gonna go ahead and shoot Sandcraft an email and try to figure out why that is. So after a bit of research, it seems like Sandcraft makes their bearings in a way that reduces the angle that the U-joints operate at to make it less of a crazy angle apparently. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the bearing in and we'll see how it works. But these are the instructions from Sandcraft, so here we go. Anyway, putting the new one in. So the trim and create opening side, I wasn't entirely sure what I'm supposed to trim. That seems like it fits in there pretty well, so I'll skip that for now. I took the bearing apart because it says to install this in the vehicle first. The short side, since this is offset, short side goes towards the passenger side, making this face forward. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And it doesn't say it in the instructions, but I'm gonna go ahead and put some blue Loctite on it, just because it seems like a good idea. It's a high vibration area. I don't know how you could go wrong with that. In fact, the factory bolts had a bunch of Loctite on them as well. So I'll go ahead and put that in, and then we'll come back and we're gonna be putting this on top of that. There you are, the base plates installed. The blue Loctite on both the bolts there. They are, I forget what size, but they're the bolts that are supplied with the bearing. So they're 17 millimeter. Blue Loctite applied to the threads. Torque to 35 foot-pounds. Shorter side goes towards the passenger side. And so now we're going to go on to step 3, which would be sliding the brass ring on, and then I'll be putting the bearing on time. So we'll put that ring on now. There's a ring here. It says that there's a chamfer, so hopefully you can see that on that side. That chamfer is going to be facing the rear of the vehicle, so I'll slide that on. So Sandcraft supplies some bearing and shaft retainer compound here, but it doesn't say which one is which. The part numbers are different. This is probably just blue Loctite. This green is probably the stuff that we should be putting on the prop shaft before we slide this bearing on. It would kind of help fix the bearing to the prop shaft there, just because it's a slip fit. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply this onto the shaft, and then we'll put the bearing on and put the spiral lock ring on in a minute. Here we are, the bearing's on. The brass ring in there. I can't see it, but anyways, that one thing you got to pay attention to, it says it in the instructions, that snap ring needs to face towards the rear of the vehicle, so that's something to pay attention to. Chamfer on the brass ring towards the back, that snap ring also towards the back, and I put that green compound on the shaft before I slid the carrier bearing on there. So next is going to be putting the spiral lock ring in, and here it is here. These go on kind of like a key ring. They're you just open that up, a little hard to do one-handed, but like that, and it just goes right in the same groove as the snap ring. So they can be easier, they can also be a pain in the butt, but I'm gonna go ahead and put that on now. It's I don't know if we can can see it there, but spiral lock's in that groove. The same groove as the snap ring. And like there it is right there. But yeah, you just start the one edge and get a tiny screwdriver and just kind of turn the drive shaft or the prop shaft around, and the with a bit of luck you'll get it to pop on there. It's certainly not easy, but it can be done. So now the instructions say to reinstall the front section of the prop shaft. So I'm gonna go ahead and just grease these splines here and grease the splines on the front diff, and that's that. That's that for that step anyways, and then we'll move on. But one thing to note is there's a green line somewhere on here. There it is. That is to be lined up with the other half that has a green line also. So grease this, grease those threads on the diff, and we'll put the prop shaft back in. Okay, so got the prop shaft back in here. Just went ahead and greased up splines on the rear half, and same on the front diff, and it slid right together. Actually took the drive line off the trans too in the back, just slid it forward, put some grease on the splines there, and then I slid that back on and put this back together. You can't see the green lines, but they line up. So now the next step is to bolt the carrier bearing to the base plate, and we're just gonna scoot this forward until it lines up there, and then we're gonna get the 2 bolts that were supplied in there. Comes with 2 bolts in there. They're not Loctited or anything like that. They're just in there slightly over hand tight, I think. And so we're going to apply Loctite to those and torque those to 30 foot-pounds. Part of the challenge is going to be getting a torque wrench under here, but luckily I have a 3/8 snap-on torque wrench with a flexi head. So I'm hoping that's going to help me out here, but anyways, we're going to torque those to 30 foot-pounds. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to put the bolt in the prop shaft through the front diff, the one that holds it onto that little input shaft. Alright, the bearings installed, and everything's torqued up. I put the 2 bolts in underneath. Under here, there's 2 bolts there, torqued to 30 foot-pounds with blue Loctite on them, and I think all that's left is just to grease the bearing and put the two side covers on there. One on the driver's side, one on the passenger side, and then we'll go have a drive and see if she rattles. What I know now about this
factory bearing. Being in perfect shape, doesn't grind. It's actually a pretty good quality bearing. I've worked on quite a few Polaris and they're not quite as hardy as these, so well done, Can-Am. But overall, I'd say Sandcraft did an amazing job. Their bearing is awesome, changes the angle. You know, I said that earlier in the video to straighten out the drive line and make it work better, so that's great. And their bearing looks like it'll last forever, and it's serviceable, which is a beautiful thing. It's expensive, so it's one of those things that maybe you should check the bearing first. And I'm under the impression that the rattling that I was hearing was from the two sections of the prop shaft where they come together that was dry. So yeah, I could have just disassembled and put grease in there and that, but overall, this is definitely a good thing to do, and that's that. Hopefully this video is helpful.